Single dad saved his drunk boss from trouble. The next day, she didn't pretend to forget. Part 1. The call that changed everything. Jasmine Carter never expected her phone to light up at 2 in the morning. But when it did, she knew something was wrong. The single mother of an 8-year-old daughter had learned to sleep lightly, always alert for emergencies. But this wasn't about her child. It was her boss calling for the 5th time in 20 minutes. "Mama, who keeps calling?" 8-year-old Kennedy asked from the doorway, rubbing her eyes and clutching her worn teddy bear. The little girl's braids were coming loose from sleep, and her brown eyes held worry beyond her years. "It's just work, baby," Jasmine replied softly, forcing warmth into her voice despite her exhaustion. "Nothing for you to worry about. Go back to bed." The phone buzzed again, but this time it was a text message. 2 simple words that made Jasmine's heart skip. "Please help." She stared at those words, her thumb hovering over the screen. Victoria Winters, her boss at Winters Marketing Solutions, was not the kind of woman who said please. In the 3 years Jasmine had worked there, Victoria had been nothing but cold, demanding, and dismissive. The woman seemed to take particular pleasure in making Jasmine's life difficult, especially after she became a single mother when her husband passed away suddenly. The late nights Victoria demanded, the weekend projects that stole precious time with Kennedy, the constant criticism delivered with cutting precision, all of it had worn Jasmine down to her bones. Yet something about that simple plea stirred compassion in her tired heart. "Mrs. Patterson is coming over to watch you for a little bit," Jasmine told Kennedy, already dialing their elderly neighbor. "Mama needs to help someone who's in trouble." 30 minutes later, Jasmine pulled her aging sedan up outside the Crystal Lounge, an upscale bar in the business district where executives closed deals over expensive cocktails. Through the tall windows, she could see Victoria sitting alone at the bar, her usually perfect posture slumped as she argued with the bartender, who appeared to be holding her car keys hostage. Taking a deep breath, Jasmine stepped out of her car and walked inside. The air was thick with cigar smoke and expensive perfume, making her feel out of place in her simple jeans and cardigan. When she approached, the scene became painfully clear. Victoria was clearly intoxicated, her designer blouse stained with red wine, her usually immaculate blonde hair falling messily from its tight bun. "I'm perfectly fine to drive," Victoria was insisting, her words slurring together. "Do you have any idea who I am? I could buy this entire establishment with one phone call." Part 2. Unexpected vulnerability. The bartender, a young man with tired eyes and admirable patience, shook his head firmly. "Ma'am, I've called you a cab 3 times. You keep sending them away. I'm not giving you back your keys." "It's not happening." "Jasmine!" Victoria exclaimed when she spotted her employee, her face lighting up with unexpected relief that seemed almost childlike. "Tell this person who I am. Tell him he can't treat me this way." The bartender looked at Jasmine with raised eyebrows, a silent question passing between them. She could feel the weight of his judgment, the assumption he was making about their relationship. "She's my boss," Jasmine admitted quietly, her voice steady despite her discomfort. "I'll take her home safely. You did the right thing keeping her keys." What Jasmine didn't notice as she helped Victoria to her feet was that across the street, seated in a luxury sedan, one of their biggest clients was watching the entire scene unfold. Richard Townsend had been considering pulling his multi-million-dollar account after Victoria had been particularly harsh during their meeting earlier that day, questioning his marketing instincts in front of his entire team. And what Victoria didn't know in her intoxicated state was that Jasmine had just sacrificed the one evening that month she had planned to finish the memory quilt she was making for Kennedy's upcoming birthday, each square representing a special moment with her late father. "Why are you helping me?" Victoria mumbled as Jasmine carefully buckled her seatbelt, treating her with the same gentle care she showed Kennedy. "I'm terrible to you." "I know I am." Jasmine paused, her hand stilling on the seatbelt. She could have said many things, could have thrown every cruel word and dismissive gesture back in Victoria's face. Instead, she met her boss's unfocused gaze and spoke a truth that came from deep within her soul. "Because it's the right thing to do," she finally said, her voice soft but firm. "And because everyone deserves kindness when they're at their lowest. Even people who forget to show it to others." Victoria's eyes filled with tears that spilled over, leaving mascara tracks down her pale cheeks. "I don't deserve your kindness." "Maybe not," Jasmine agreed, starting the car. "But I'm giving it to you anyway. That's what good people do." Little did Jasmine know that those words would echo in Victoria's mind long after the alcohol had worn off, setting in motion events that would test both their characters in ways neither could imagine. As she drove through the quiet city streets toward Victoria's upscale penthouse, Jasmine wondered what demons had driven her usually controlled boss to this state. She'd learned long ago that hurt people hurt people. And beneath Victoria's ice-cold exterior, there had to be pain she was running from. The drive was mostly silent, except for Victoria's occasional slurred directions and a few incoherent mumblings about meetings and deadlines. When they arrived at the luxury building, Jasmine realized she would need to help Victoria inside. The woman could barely stand, let alone walk straight. "Keys?" Jasmine asked gently, her nursing instincts from her brief time in healthcare kicking in. Victoria fumbled through her designer purse, expensive items tumbling onto the car seat, before she finally produced a sleek key card. As they made their way through the marble lobby, the night doorman gave them a knowing look that made Jasmine's cheeks burn with embarrassment. "It's not what you think," she started to explain, feeling the need to protect her reputation. But the doorman just nodded with a kind smile. "I think you're a good person helping someone in need. That's all I see, miss." Part 3. Behind the ice Victoria's apartment was a revelation. Jasmine had imagined something cold and impersonal, but the reality exceeded even those expectations. Everything was stark white, black, or polished chrome. Not a single photograph adorned the walls. No artwork that spoke of personal taste. No throw pillows or blankets that suggested human warmth. It felt more like a designer showroom than a home where someone actually lived. "Bathroom," Victoria mumbled urgently, and Jasmine quickly guided her to what she hoped was the right door. While Victoria was occupied, Jasmine moved to the kitchen to get her some water. As she searched through perfectly organized cabinets for a glass, her eyes fell on a single photograph magnetized to the otherwise pristine refrigerator. It showed Victoria much younger, maybe in her early 20s, with an older black woman who shared her smile. Both were laughing in a way Jasmine had never seen her boss express: open, joyful, free. "That's my mother," Victoria said, startling Jasmine. She had emerged from the bathroom looking marginally better, though still unsteady on her feet. She steadied herself against the doorframe, her eyes fixed on the photograph with such longing it made Jasmine's heart ache. "She died 5 years ago today." The simple statement hung in the air between them, suddenly explaining everything about this night. The drinking, the loss of control, the desperate phone calls. This wasn't about weakness or poor judgment. This was about grief that still cut like broken glass. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine said, handing her the water. Their fingers brushed momentarily, and Jasmine felt the tremor in Victoria's hand. "I lost my husband 2 years ago. Those anniversaries never get easier. Some days, the missing feels fresh as the day it happened." Victoria took the glass, her blue eyes meeting Jasmine's brown ones with unexpected clarity. "Marcus, right? That was his name?" Jasmine was stunned that Victoria remembered. In 3 years, her boss had never once acknowledged the framed photo on Jasmine's desk or the black armband she'd worn for months after his death. Before she could respond, Victoria's phone rang shrilly in the quiet apartment. She glanced at the screen, and her face went pale as snow. "It's Richard Townsend," she whispered, referring to the CEO of their largest client. Her hand shook so badly she nearly dropped the phone. "Don't answer," Jasmine advised quickly. "Not in your condition. It can wait until morning." But Victoria was already accepting the call, her thumb moving on autopilot. She switched instantly to a professional tone that barely betrayed her intoxication. Years of corporate training overriding common sense. "Richard, what a pleasant surprise." Jasmine could hear the angry voice on the other end of the line. Words like unprofessional behavior and reconsidering our partnership cutting through the speaker. Victoria's face crumpled as she realized what was happening. All her defenses stripped away by alcohol and grief. "Richard, please," she said, and the desperation in her voice was painful to hear. "I can explain." "This isn't." Jasmine surprised herself by gently taking the phone from Victoria's trembling hand. Her heart pounded, but her voice came out steady and professional. "Mr. Townsend, this is Jasmine Carter from the creative team. I apologize for the interruption, but Ms. Winters has just received some devastating personal news. This evening today marks the anniversary of her mother's passing. She was trying to process it privately, and I'm just helping her get home safely." Part 4. Turning tides, there was a long pause on the other end of the line. Jasmine could feel Victoria staring at her with wide, disbelieving eyes. She pressed on, drawing on every ounce of professionalism she'd learned in her years of customer service and corporate work. "I understand you have concerns about the meeting today." "And they're valid," Jasmine continued, keeping her tone respectful but confident. "Perhaps we could schedule a follow-up meeting on Monday to address them properly. I know Ms. Winters values your partnership deeply, and I'm certain we can find solutions that exceed your expectations." Richard Townsend's tone noticeably softened. "I didn't know about her mother. That changes things." He paused. "Who did you say you were again?" "Jasmine Carter, sir. I work on the creative team." "Well, Miss Carter, you handled that with remarkable professionalism. Tell Victoria we'll talk Monday morning, 9 o'clock sharp. And tell her I'm sorry for her loss." When Jasmine hung up, Victoria was staring at her with an expression that mixed shock, gratitude, and something else she couldn't quite name. "You saved my career," Victoria said quietly, tears streaming down her face again. "After everything I've done to make your life difficult. After all the times I've dismissed your ideas in meetings, denied your requests to leave early for Kennedy's school events, passed you over for promotions you deserved." Her voice broke. "Why would you do that for me?" Jasmine set the phone down and guided Victoria to the pristine white couch. "Like I said, it's the right thing to do. My mama raised me to help people when they're hurting, even if they haven't always been kind to me. Especially then, actually." She helped Victoria lie down, placing a glass of water and aspirin on the coffee table. "You're going to have a rough morning, but this should help. There's more aspirin in the bottle, and I'm leaving my number on your counter in case you need anything." As Jasmine turned to leave, gathering her purse and car keys, Victoria's voice stopped her. "Your daughter Kennedy, right? The one whose school recital I wouldn't let you attend last month." Jasmine's throat tightened at the memory. Kennedy had been so disappointed, scanning the audience for her mother's face that never appeared. "Yes, I'm sorry, Jasmine," Victoria whispered, her eyes already drifting toward sleep. "I'm so sorry for that." "I'm sorry for everything." Jasmine didn't respond. She'd heard apologies from drunk people before, working her way through college as a bartender. They rarely meant anything in the light of day. People said what sounded right in their vulnerable moments, then went right back to who they'd always been once sobriety returned. As she drove home through the empty streets, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. Jasmine prepared herself for Monday morning when Victoria would undoubtedly pretend none of this had ever happened. That's how these things always went. The powerful never acknowledged their moments of vulnerability to those they considered beneath them. She'd learned that lesson time and time again. What Jasmine couldn't possibly know is she quietly thanked Mrs. Patterson and checked on her sleeping daughter was that Victoria Winters lay awake in her expensive bed, staring at the ceiling, making a decision that would transform both their lives. Part 5. Monday morning. Surprise Monday morning arrived with its usual chaos. Kennedy couldn't find her homework, the milk had gone sour, and Jasmine burned the toast while trying to braid her daughter's hair. By the time she dropped Kennedy at school and arrived at the office, she was already exhausted. And the day hadn't even properly begun. She braced herself as she approached the creative department, expecting either cold dismissal from Victoria or outright hostility. Maybe even termination. She had overstepped badly on Friday night, speaking to a major client without authorization. What she didn't expect was to find Victoria waiting by her desk with 2 cups of coffee. "Good morning, Jasmine," Victoria said, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. She looked impeccable as always in a charcoal gray suit, but there was something different in her eyes. Something softer. "I brought you coffee. Cream with 2 sugars, right?" Jasmine stared at her, momentarily speechless. In 3 years, Victoria had never once remembered how she took her coffee, let alone brought her any. She'd barely acknowledged Jasmine's existence beyond barking orders and criticism. "Thank you," Jasmine managed, accepting the cup cautiously, half expecting it to be some kind of trap or cruel joke. "I'd like to speak with you in my office when you have a moment," Victoria continued, and something in her tone sounded almost like a request rather than a command. "If you're not too busy, of course." As Jasmine followed her boss through the office, she noticed the entire floor buzzing with confused whispers. Coworkers openly stared. Victoria Winters bringing coffee to an employee. The same woman who once made an intern cry for bringing her the wrong brand of sparkling water. Something was definitely wrong. Once inside Victoria's office, the door closed with a soft click. Victoria turned to face her, and Jasmine could see she'd been crying recently. Her eyes were slightly red despite the careful makeup. "I remember everything about Friday night," Victoria said without preamble, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I want you to know that. I wasn't so drunk that I've forgotten your kindness or what you did for me." Jasmine shifted uncomfortably. "Ms. Winters, it's really not necessary to—" "It is necessary," Victoria interrupted gently. She moved to her desk and picked up a folder, her hands trembling slightly. "You helped me when you had every reason to leave me there. You protected my reputation with Richard Townsend. You were kind and compassionate when I've been nothing but cruel to you for 3 years." She held out the folder, and Jasmine took it with uncertain hands. Inside was paperwork for a promotion to Senior Creative Director, a position 2 levels above her current role. The salary listed made her heart stop. It was nearly double what she currently made. "This comes with a 40% salary increase, flexible working hours, and your own team," Victoria explained, watching Jasmine's face carefully. "You'll report directly to me, but you'll have complete autonomy over your projects and your schedule. You'll never have to miss another school event for Kennedy." Jasmine stared at the papers, her vision blurring with tears she fought to control. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you doing this?" Part 6. Breaking down walls. Victoria's professional facade cracked, revealing the vulnerable woman Jasmine had glimpsed on Friday night. She moved to the window, looking out over the city as if gathering courage. "Because you deserve it," Victoria said softly. "Because I've been punishing you for having what I lost, a family that needs you, a purpose beyond quarterly reports and profit margins." You reminded me every single day of the life I could have had if I hadn't buried myself in work after my mother died." She turned back to face Jasmine, and the pain in her eyes was raw and real. "My mother was everything to me. She was warm where I'm cold, kind where I'm cruel. She was a social worker who spent her life helping people, and she raised me to be like her. When she got cancer, I watched her suffer for 2 years. I was there for every treatment, every setback, every small victory and crushing defeat." Victoria's voice cracked. "When she died, I couldn't bear to be that open, that vulnerable ever again. So I became this." She gestured to herself, to the cold office, to the woman everyone feared. "I threw myself into work because numbers and strategies don't die on you. Success doesn't leave you alone in an empty apartment, wondering why you weren't enough to save the person you loved most." Jasmine felt tears sliding down her own cheeks. She understood that pain intimately, the guilt that came with surviving, with continuing to breathe and work and exist when someone you loved no longer could. "I resented you especially," Victoria continued, "because you lost Marcus and somehow you didn't become hard like I did. You stayed soft. You stayed kind. You kept showing up with a smile for Kennedy, even when I knew you were barely holding it together. And instead of admiring that strength, I punished you for it." Before Jasmine could respond, her phone buzzed urgently. She glanced at it and her heart sank. Kennedy's school again. Her daughter had been sick a lot lately, and each call filled her with the specific terror only a single parent knows. "Kennedy's running a fever," Jasmine said, already gathering her things by instinct. "I need to go pick her up." "I'm so sorry. I know we need to discuss this, but, of course, take the rest of the day," Victoria said immediately, moving to open the door for her. "Is there anything you need? Should I call a doctor? Does Kennedy have someone to watch her while you work tomorrow?" Jasmine paused, stunned by the genuine concern in Victoria's voice. "No, thank you. My neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, can help. We'll be okay." "Jasmine," Victoria called as she was leaving. When Jasmine turned back, Victoria's expression was earnest and determined. "I meant what I said. Things are going to be different around here. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I'm asking you to let me prove that Friday night wasn't just drunk words. I want to be better. I need to be better." As Jasmine rushed to Kennedy's school, she couldn't shake the image of Victoria's face, the vulnerability, the determination, the pain that mirrored her own. Maybe people could change. Maybe grief didn't have to turn you into stone. Maybe kindness could crack even the coldest exterior. What she didn't know was that Victoria Winters had spent the entire weekend sitting with her mother's photograph, having long conversations with a woman who could no longer answer. She'd cried more in those 2 days than in the 5 years since her mother's death. And she'd made a promise to the memory of the woman who'd raised her to lead with compassion. She would find her way back to the person she'd been before grief hardened her heart. Part 7. Unexpected visitor 3 days later. Jasmine was working from home while Kennedy recovered from a nasty flu. Her daughter was finally sleeping peacefully on the couch, covered with the quilt Jasmine's grandmother had made. When the doorbell rang. Opening, it revealed the last person she expected, Victoria Winters, standing awkwardly in the hallway of their modest apartment building. She was dressed casually in jeans and a sweater. Jasmine had never seen her in anything but business attire. In her hands were a large gift bag and what appeared to be a container of homemade soup. "I hope I'm not intruding," Victoria said, looking genuinely uncertain in a way that seemed almost foreign on her usually confident face. "I just wanted to check on Kennedy." "And you?" Jasmine invited her in, watching with fascination as the woman who commanded boardrooms with iron authority now stood nervously in her cluttered living room, taking in the mismatched furniture, the photographs covering every surface, the toys scattered across the floor. "I brought chicken soup," Victoria explained, holding out the container with both hands like an offering. It's my mother's recipe. She always said it could cure anything. And some books I thought Kennedy might enjoy while she's recovering. Before Jasmine could respond, a small voice came from the couch. Mama, who's here? Kennedy appeared in the hallway, wrapped in her favorite blanket covered with butterflies. Her braids were messy from sleep, and her brown eyes were curious but cautious. This is Miss Winters, Jasmine explained, her hand instinctively going to her daughter's shoulder. She's Mama's boss from work. Kennedy's eyes widened with recognition. The dragon lady? Jasmine wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She'd used that term exactly once, months ago, during a particularly frustrating evening when she'd been venting to Mrs. Patterson. Kennedy must have overheard. Baby, that's not polite. To her absolute astonishment, Victoria laughed. A genuine, warm sound that Jasmine had never heard from her before. She knelt down to Kennedy's level with surprising grace. Yes, the dragon lady, Victoria confirmed gently, meeting the little girl's eyes with honesty and warmth. Though I'm trying very hard not to breathe fire anymore. Your mama is helping me learn how to be kind instead. Kennedy studied her with the frank curiosity only children possess. Mama says you're very smart, but you forgot how to be happy. Jasmine closed her eyes in mortification. Kennedy, that's not exactly what Your mama is absolutely right. Victoria interrupted softly, her voice thick with emotion. I did forget how to be happy for a while. But I'm learning again, thanks to people like you and your mother who are patient with dragons. The simple honesty of this exchange shifted something in the room. Kennedy, satisfied with the answer, invited Victoria to see the fort she'd built earlier from couch cushions and blankets. As Victoria sat on the floor designer jeans and all listening to, Kennedy explained the elaborate rules of her imaginary kingdom. Jasmine watched a side of her boss she never knew existed. Later, after Kennedy had fallen back asleep, and Victoria had helped Jasmine clean up dinner dishes, another surreal experience. They sat at the small kitchen table with cups of tea. The apartment was quiet, except for Kennedy's gentle breathing and the distant sounds of the city outside. Thank you for coming, Jasmine said softly. It meant a lot to Kennedy. And to me, double quotes. Victoria traced the rim of her cup with one finger, her eyes distant. I've been thinking constantly about what you said Friday night, about second chances and kindness even when it's hard. She looked up, and Jasmine could see vulnerability shining in her eyes. Do you really believe people can change, Jasmine? Or do we just become better at hiding who we really are? The question hung between them, weighted with implications neither was ready to fully explore. Jasmine thought about her own journey through grief, about the person she'd been before Marcus died and who she'd become after. I think, Jasmine said carefully, choosing her words with intention, that who we really are isn't fixed. We're shaped by our experiences, our choices, our pain. But we can choose to be shaped differently. We can decide that our grief will make us gentler instead of harder. Part 8. New Beginnings. 6 months after that life-changing Friday night. Jasmine stood in Victoria's apartment, now transformed with family photographs. Kennedy's colorful artwork on the refrigerator, and the comfortable warmth of a space filled with love and laughter. The stark whites and blacks had given way to earth tones and soft textures. It felt like a home now. Victoria was in the kitchen, attempting to recreate her mother's famous lasagna recipe, while Kennedy helped by sprinkling far too much cheese on top, both of them giggling like co-conspirators. Jasmine watched from the doorway, her heart so full it almost hurt. If someone had told her a year ago that her tyrannical boss would become one of her closest friends, that they would spend weekends together at Kennedy's soccer games and school events, that Victoria would become the honorary aunt who never missed a birthday or milestone, she would have thought they were delusional. Are you going to stand there all evening, or are you going to help us with this culinary disaster? Victoria called out, finally spotting her. There was joy in her voice that had become wonderfully familiar, replacing the ice that used to define her. The office had transformed too. Victoria's reputation had shifted from the Dragon Lady to the boss who actually cared about her employees' lives. She'd implemented flexible schedules, generous family leave policies, and a mentorship program that prioritized promoting from within. The company was thriving not in spite of these changes, but because of them. Richard Townsend had not only kept his account, but had expanded it significantly, telling everyone who would listen about the remarkable transformation he'd witnessed. Other clients had followed, drawn to a company that valued humanity alongside profit, and Jasmine had flourished. A promotion had given her financial stability she'd only dreamed of. She'd been able to move into a larger apartment, start a college fund for Kennedy, and even begin writing again, something she'd abandoned after Marcus died. Her first children's book, inspired by stories she told Kennedy, was being reviewed by publishers with Victoria's enthusiastic support and connections. Later that night, after Kennedy had gone to sleep in what had become her room at Victoria's apartment, the two women sat on the balcony overlooking the city lights. The spring air was warm and filled with possibility. Do you ever think about how different things would be if I hadn't answered your call that night? Victoria asked quietly. Jasmine considered the question, watching the city pulse with life below them. Sometimes. But then I remember something my grandmother used to say. The most important moments in our lives often don't announce themselves. They just happen, and we only recognize them looking back. Victoria smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes and made them shine. Your grandmother sounds like she was a remarkable woman. Like my mother. I wish they could have met. I think they would have been friends, Jasmine agreed. They both understood that strength and kindness aren't opposites. That the bravest thing you can do is stay soft in a world that wants to harden you. They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only exists between people who've seen each other at their worst and chosen to stay anyway. Jasmine thought about the journey they'd taken, from adversary to colleague to friends to something deeper she was only beginning to understand. I'm grateful, you know, Victoria said suddenly, for that night, for your kindness when I deserved none, for showing me that I didn't have to stay trapped in the ice castle I'd built around myself. I'm grateful too, Jasmine replied honestly. You've changed my life and Kennedy's in ways I never imagined possible. You gave us stability, opportunity, and something even more precious. You gave us family. Victoria's eyes glistened with tears she didn't try to hide anymore. I want you to know that helping you wasn't charity or guilt. You earned every opportunity through your talent and dedication. I just finally removed the obstacles I'd put in your way. I know, Jasmine said softly, but you didn't have to become who you've become. You didn't have to open your heart and your home to us. You didn't have to honor your mother's memory by living the values she taught you. Those were choices you made, and they matter. As they sat together under the stars, both women thought about the phone call that had changed everything. About the choice Jasmine had made to answer, to help, to show compassion when resentment would have been easier and more justified. Sometimes, the most important, crossroads in our lives don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes, they arrive as inconvenient phone calls on Friday nights, as moments of compassion when bitterness would be simpler, as second chances given without expectation of return. And sometimes, if we're brave enough to answer those calls, to offer that compassion, to give those second chances, we find ourselves exactly where we're meant to be, with people who were always meant to be part of our story. Jasmine looked at Victoria, this woman who had transformed from adversary to ally to something like family, and felt profound gratitude for that moment of choice. She could have ignored the calls. She could have left Victoria to face the consequences of her actions alone. She could have protected herself and her limited time and energy, but she had chosen differently. She had chosen kindness, and that single choice had rippled outward in ways she never could have imagined, transforming not just her own life and Kennedy's, but Victoria's too. It had changed an entire workplace culture, affected dozens of employees and their families, and reminded everyone who witnessed it that redemption is possible and people can change when given compassion and a genuine chance. As the city lights twinkled below them like earthbound stars, Jasmine smiled at the thought that somewhere, her grandmother and Victoria's mother were probably smiling too, proud of the women they'd raised and the choices they'd made, because sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come from the most unlikely places. Sometimes dragons can remember how to be human again. And sometimes, when we choose love over bitterness and compassion over revenge, we don't just change one life, we change the whole world around us, one small act of kindness at a time.